What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Rams Brothers. I'm your host, Dean, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother and the other great host of this show, Nick. And Nick, training camp is less than a week away. The Hall of Fame game is scheduled for August 1st, so we're 13 days away from preseason football starting. We're in kind of a lull period, but we're getting there. And first and most importantly, how are you, my good brother?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm ready for it to get started. It feels like it's right around the corner. Summer's kind of flying by.
Yes.
It's scorching hot here in California, but I'm ready for it to continue to be hot all the way till October. But at least then, football will be on.
Scorching hot here in New Jersey, too. So those who don't know, I'm in New Jersey, Nick's in California, and we're reuniting in a couple of weeks. Nick finally gets to meet my son. We got a lot of fun coming up. We get to watch preseason football together. We always say we're going to record a podcast in person together, but we never do. So let's not make that promise again. But jumping into this episode, we wanted to do an NFC West preview, right? Because, a lot of stuff has come out of OTAs and as camp is approaching between the Rams, the Niners, the Cardinals, and even the Seahawks, right? And we kind of wanted to look at a historical background, understand where the wins, losses sit historically since 2017, since Sean McVay became the Rams' head coach, and just try and do like an overall preview of what we can expect for the division. So we're going to start with the Rams. Obviously.
Of course. Obviously. Yes.
Because this is a Rams podcast.
Yes.
Over under 2024 win total. The Rams over at 8.5 is minus 144. So
full disclosure.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, everybody. I've already hammered this. I have a lot of money on Rams over 8.5. It makes no sense to me why it's the same as teams like the Jags. 10 wins last year on a team that wasn't supposed to be there, and now you add this great running back. I know you lose Aaron Donald, but great draft class. 8.5 just feels insulting. That's all.
I think it does too, and that's why Vegas has it as a favorite. In terms of strength of schedule, we're at 0.505, which is tied 12th. It's tied with the 49ers. We know what happened last year, right? 10-7 record. They won 7 of their 8 last games coming out of the bye. They were one of the better teams in the league. Coming out of the bye week, where they had Matthew Stafford in the pistol. They've been executing on a high level with their run scheme. They ended up losing in the wild card round to the Lions by 1 single point. But, just in terms of changes year over year and some additional detail and some context added to the Rams as of right now, the offseason was all about being more physically dominant and opposing at the line of scrimmage. And the Rams historically have been kind of a finesse team, right? You go back to 2021, where they really couldn't run the football well. Their offensive line was a little bit of a liability. Matthew Stafford wasn't empty a ton. But they've been continuing to build upon this dominant run approach in their new scheme while moving majority into duo, while still keeping some of the zone-based runs in their back pocket. But they're going to be able to execute that at a high level. We talk about the bulk that they've added to the offensive line. They're one of the heaviest offensive line units in the league. Keeping Matthew Stafford upright, adding talent in Blake Corum and Kyron Williams being as efficient as he was down the stretch coming off of that injury, and also rebuilding the defense with tons of talent via free agency on the back end in lieu of Aaron Donald retiring. And even in the draft, look at Jared Verse. Obviously tons of talent. Braden Fisk, even Tyler Davis as a nose tackle is going to be in rotation with Bobby Brown. Cameron Kinchins, who we love a ton, who we think is going to get some snaps in the secondary. I think holistically, they've built this in a little bit of a different way that they have in the past, but the over-under win total of 8.5 seems like it should be hammered. And I'm glad that you and other Rams fans, I'm sure, have hammered that line over the last couple of months.
Yeah, when I took it, it was like minus 170 at 8.5. So it has since moved down, which means they're trying to get juice on the other side. We haven't seen a consistent run game in the Stafford McVay era, this entire time. And
unless you go back to Todd Gurley, right?
No, Stafford McVay era.
Oh, right. Okay, I get you.
Kyron, and then you add Corum, Kyron Williams and Corum together. The pros just outweigh the cons, I think, from the offense versus the defense. And I think there are going to be some defensive cons this year, just when you subtract a Hall of Famer, top 100 player in all of sports in Aaron Donald, you're going to lose some of what you had on the defense. But if you have a consistent run game, we saw it in McVay with Goff. And if you subscribe to the notion that Stafford is just a better quarterback than Goff, then the offense should be skyrocketing in what we have to see under these two. So hopefully if you have that great run game, you can control clock a lot more, and you don't have to ask the defense to do as much. And that is what we get to see. You get a lead early, the offense gets off hot, and then you just control the rest of the game. And I just don't look at the opponents. There is a lot of opportunities for them to not only get over 8.5 wins, but I think to end up on top of the NFC West.
Yeah, I totally agree. And fantastic segue too, because you look back to 2017 and they were 8th in total rushing yards, 8th in yards per game, 5th in rushing touchdowns. They finished 11-5. They lost in the wild card round to Atlanta, but a playoff team. 2018, 3rd in total rushing yards, 3rd in yards per game, 2nd in rushing touchdowns. They finished 13-3 and lost the Super Bowl. 2023, they weren't a top 10 rushing offense, but they were right on the cusp. They were 11th in total rushing yards. They were 11th in rushing yards per game, 8th in rushing touchdowns. They finished 10-7 and lost in the wild card round. So the defense just has to be average, right? Yeah. If the run game is a top 10 offense, a component of the offense, like they are going to be right back in the playoffs, potentially right back in the wild card round, the divisional round. And I think even the NFC Championship would be considered overachieving in terms of the win-loss totals that are being set. But like coming off of the last 8 games of last year and seeing how they performed in the wild card round as a big underdog going into Detroit, there's plenty of reason to believe why this team is going to be a very, very, very tough out towards the end of the season. And you look to, like, in comparison to the NFC West, the other teams in the NFC West since 2017, since Sean McVay became the head coach, they're 5-10 against San Francisco 49ers, but they're 1-0 in the playoffs, obviously won the most important one in the NFC Championship. They're 10-5 versus Seattle, 1-0 in the playoffs with the Jared Goff game, where he could hardly hold the football. John Wolford set the start. They were in the bone uniforms, and the Rams came out on top, and then lost in the divisional round to Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. And then they're 12-3 against the Cardinals. So the Cardinals are very much considered the bottom feeders of the division since 2017, 1-0 in the playoffs. But they have the best overall record versus the NFC West since Sean McVay became the head coach at 27-18. And they're 3-0. They're the only team in the NFC West that has a 3-0 playoff record against NFC West opponents. So, I mean, there's a lot to be excited about with this Rams team. Obviously, you talk about some of the personnel they added, the veteran talent they added in the secondary on the back end. What they did in putting Matthew Stafford in the pistol, being able to execute their duo scheme at a high level towards the back half of the year, coming out of the bye. They were 2 different teams, right? I mean, you saw 2 different, you have 3-6 going into the bye, and then they were 7-1 over the final 8 weeks of the season. And they took care of business. The Thursday night football game, they had 4 games in 2 days. I think it was against the Commanders and the Saints. Coming off of the Baltimore overtime loss. I mean, just a lot of impressive things that you could hang your hat on going into this season, as long as everybody stays healthy within training camp in the preseason.
To think that McVay and Stafford were able to win a Super Bowl when you subtract their Puka Nacua, which was Odell at the time, and have essentially no run game. I mean, like very, very little run game. To add that, I mean, hopefully what I'm foreseeing with Kyron and Blake is truly what has been talked about, like the last great run game since Todd Gurley. If you add that to what we already have, and I know you're subtracting some on defense, the aspirations for this team, I think, truly could be Super Bowl.
I totally agree with you. Even though, like, you look at the Super Bowl odds, it might be 13th, 14th. Even Matthew Stafford's MVP odds are somewhere in that range as well. It doesn't matter. You saw what they could do. You saw how much of a tough out they were towards the back half of the season. And even in that wild card playoff round, which the Lions went to the NFC Championship and almost beat the 49ers to go to the Super Bowl. So, tough opponent, and they brought what they needed to bring to that game to almost win it in the end. Pass interference call, the Tyler Higbee injury, so the lack of a pass interference call, rather, you should say, on Puka Nacua towards the end of the game. Some of the clock management, the 4th down decisions, which is why they brought in Stretch. So I think a lot of those things are going to fix themselves, and you'll see it immediately in week 1. But transitioning over to the Niners, over under win total this season, 11.5. The over is plus 116. So Vegas doesn't think, the odds show that they're not going to win more than 11.5 games. They won 12 last year. Like I mentioned, same strength of schedule as the Rams, 0.505, which is tied for 12th. 2023 finish, we all know they were 12-5. They lost the Super Bowl in overtime against the Chiefs. But you look at just the historical matchups against the NFC West since 2017, which is around the time Kyle Shanahan came in. They're 10-5 versus the Rams, as we know, 0-1 in the playoffs. And there's a great, great picture of Deebo Samuel being consoled by Odell Beckham Jr. 7-8 versus Seattle, 1-0 in the playoffs, and 7-7 versus Arizona, 0-1 in the playoffs. Their record against the NFC West is 24-20 since 2017, only a 1-1 playoff record. But in terms of how they finished last year and just some additional details and changes year over year, the drama with wide receiver Brandon Ayuk, his contract situation has been up in the air for like 6 months, despite the fact that the 49ers under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, they've resolved a lot of these type of issues during training camp. Like you could see within contract situations, the dates in which they've been handled have all been end of July into August, even into September with somebody like Nick Bosa. Of course, they have, 8 top 50 players. You look at Fred Warner, you look at Hufanga, you look at Nick Bosa and Debo and Ayuk and even Brock Purdy and obviously Christian McCaffrey. Like they got a ton of talent on this team. But like asking Kyle Juszczyk to take a pay cut, and Juszczyk being, reporting that he was hurt by the front office because he was asked to take a pay cut. And they have one of, if not the oldest offensive lines in football. And it wasn't a strength last year. And it's been such a strength in previous years, the way they've been able to build it, the way that Kyle Shanahan schemes up his offense. Almost half of Brock Purdy's throws last year came under pressure. I think they're a bottom 10, bottom 15 unit as an offensive line as it currently stands. Like you got Trent Williams at left tackle, Aaron Banks at left guard, who's in the final year of his deal. Jake Brendel, their starting center, he's the second highest paid offensive lineman on the roster, but he's going to be 32 this year and missed all of OTAs with knee tendonitis. You got Ben Barch, who, he could see plenty of time there at center if Jake Brendel can't, hold his own for, the season. And then you got John Feliciano at right guard, but he's on the older side, right? I'd be interested to see if Dominic Pooney gets some time there as well. And then Colt McKivitz at right tackle with Jalen Moore potentially in relief. It's underwhelming and it's aging fast. And the entire core of this roster is starting to age fast. And, teams coming off of Super Bowl losses, we all know what the story is.
Christian McCaffrey, your offensive line can be a little older and banged up because he can pick up a lot of what they're laying down. He can help them get back and just be the best running back in the league and pick up huge yardage, even if the offensive line isn't doing what they're having to do. And then you also add Brock Purdy, who does have that escape ability in the pocket where if things are breaking down, we saw in the NFC Championship game, he kind of saved them and was able to pick up a lot of yardage with their feet, with his feet, which was huge for them. And it's just the house of cards has to break at some point, right? How much longer are the 49ers going to just be able to be this dominant NFC powerhouse? Is it when they finally have to pay Brock Purdy? Will they even pay Brock Purdy the kind of money? If it's not this year, then really things are going to fall. And with the Ayuk card being pulled out, and people seem to be worrying more about contracts on their team than actually climbing that Super Bowl mountain again, which is really, really difficult. But for a team that's been to the NFC Championship 2 years in a row and maybe could have been to the championship or the Super Bowl if their quarterback didn't get injured in that Eagles game.
Yeah, totally.
You can just never count them out. Over 11.5. Part of me wants just to go over just based on what we've seen from them. And I know they barely scraped that last year, but Shanahan should never be disregarded as a B-level, C-tier level coach.
Yeah, no, I think he's very easily a top 3 coach, if not top 5. And Brock Purdy, if he's not a top 10 quarterback, he's right on the cusp. He's 11, he's 12, but his escapability, right, what he's able to do when the play breaks down, I think even timing, things like just being able to extend plays and being able to be on schedule is so important for the 49ers' offense. The more I watch tape on him, the more impressed I am. I want to come on here and say Brock Purdy's a system quarterback, but he's not. I don't think he would be as great of a quarterback if he wasn't in Kyle Shanahan's system, but he's still a really good player, and Kyle Shanahan is a really good coach. And then some of the other things that are factors that everybody needs to consider are Ricky Parasol was their top pick at number 31 and is starting a training camp on the non-football injury list. So that news broke the exact same day that the Brandon Ayuk news broke. Non-football injury list means the injury occurred away from the facility. So the injury was undisclosed. Nobody knows exactly what happened with Ricky Parasol. But if Brandon Ayuk's not there, they're going to be dependent on him. Cornerback Renardo Green from FSU, who benefited greatly, in my opinion, from Jared Verse and Braden Fisk getting after the quarterback. Malik Mustafa, who I think is going to be a really, really great safety on the back end, and probably my personal favorite player in the draft class. Dominic Pooney, who we mentioned from an offensive line perspective from Kansas, who will likely see time. Isaac Guerrero from a running back perspective. The 49ers know how to bring in running back talent, and they know how to execute it at a high level. Yeah. I obviously hate them, but I like what they did in the draft, and you can't discount the fact that they've been such a strong contender in the NFC for such a long period of time. They didn't really make a splash, though, in free agency. Leonard Floyd is now with the 49ers, which Rams fans hate. Uter Gross-Matos and Jordan Elliott. So some pretty significant injuries down the stretch, too, with Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw. But even Eric Armstead was their longest tenured player, is no longer on the roster. Javon Kinlaw went to the Jets. Chase Young went to the Saints. And their defensive line, it's been replaced with some of the aforementioned bodies that we just kind of named, in Leonard Floyd and Uter Gross-Matos and Jordan Elliott. But it doesn't necessarily make up for the lack of veterans being on the field. And Eric Armstead was such a mainstay for this defense for such a long period of time. It doesn't feel like, though, that they got better this offseason. I feel like they're kind of humming around right where they were last year. Lots of one-year deals to kind of keep their Super Bowl hopes alive. And
you could truly argue that they didn't need to get better. Like they just needed a better plan in overtime. Yeah. Like I think if you stay the same, you're giving yourself a 50, maybe not 50-50, but like at least 30% chance of getting back to the Super Bowl, maybe even like 45. Just because based on how shoddy the NFC is compared to the AFC. I mean, like if you do the top teams, just period, I think people are putting out their lists and it's like 8.
Yeah, Cowboys, Eagles, Lions. I mean, I took the 49ers in a head-to-head matchup against any of those teams.
Right, yeah. And then, Rams, in division, so anything can happen, even though they kind of owned us in the regular season. But still, they're just a fantastic unit, top to bottom. And I think they continue, as long as you have, their pillars right now who feel like it's Kittle, it's Purdy, and I think for them, more than anything, it's Shanahan, because I think if you swap out Purdy, you can still have a fantastic offense to run around those guys.
Yeah, you could. I mean, I just think that the matchup historically is so interesting, right? I mean, like, obviously the 49ers had the Rams numbers back in the late 80s into the 90s. But then obviously as we've transgressed into the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan relationship and the history behind that, it's been so interesting from a regular season perspective. And then the postseason, in the most important game in the history of their guys' career, what happened? 20-17 victory, NFC Championship in the Rams Stadium. Rams went to the Super Bowl. Rams won the Super Bowl. So, I mean, that's kind of where the divide is, right? It's like everyone wants to talk about the regular season numbers, but it's Rams versus 49ers head-to-head in the NFC Championship. Rams came out on top, and they have the advantage as of right now. But, like, the Niners have been such a mainstay, as I mentioned, in the NFC. It's going to be so interesting to see how this season progresses and see how the Rams approach the 49ers with a little bit of an aging offensive line. I just feel like they need a top 10 defense again to be the same kind of team that they were last year, and they've had that in years past.
Yeah.
So just a lot of talent on the roster, as we know.
I think they'll get there. I think they'll find keys. I think people want to play in San Francisco as well, like throughout the season.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, entirely. And the Seahawks, I feel like, are really interesting, right? It's like Rams 49ers is obviously the focal point of the conversation, but over-under win total for the Seahawks, the under is plus 112 at 7.5. Strength of schedule, 0.44 or 0.488, tied for 24th. 2023 finish. They were 9-8. They just barely missed the playoffs in Pete Carroll's last year. And in terms of historicals from 2017, here's where they fare against all of other NFC West opponents. So they're 5-10 against the Rams, 0-1 in the playoffs, 0-1 in the playoffs against the Niners. They're 8-7 though, so they own the head-to-head record in terms of the regular season since 2017, and then 10-4 against the Cardinals, and they haven't played them in the playoffs yet. But 23-21. Since 2017 against the NFC West. So they're humming around 500. They're always kind of a tough out, but I feel like the Rams, they've had their number. Like they swept them last year. I feel like they're probably going to do it again. No more Pete Carroll. It's Mike McDonald, who's now the head coach from Baltimore. So a lot of changes year over year, but like We did score 37 points or 31 points, whatever the total was, against Baltimore in that overtime game. So, I mean, like,
people are saying, I'm like, what I'm hearing from Seattle fans is like, oh, dude, I cannot wait to watch that Rams-Ravens game twice a year. You know what I mean? Like, similar situation where it's just two powerhouse offenses like going back and forth. And that's what we're bringing to the table with our new head coach. And I just don't, I mean, like, the Ravens have so much more talent on offense. Just start with the top, right? Compare Geno to Lamar, man. I mean, I don't think, but 7.5 is perfect because I think that's exactly where they'll be. Like, maybe 7 wins and a tie to like push that over to hit exactly 7.5. Because once you set Geno Smith to be your franchise quarterback, I think you put yourself in a box of how far you can obtain. And I think that, first year with the new head coach, they'll probably let Geno play it out. But they're a prime team to draft like new talent. Like they're going to have to start rebuilding around what this new head coach wants to bring into the building. Yeah. And I don't think it's going to be Geno Smith. And I think Seattle fans are kidding themselves if they think it is going to be Geno Smith. We saw that one fantastic year. And it really wasn't even that great. They lost first round in the playoffs. And then last year he came back down to earth like really quickly.
I still remember Geno's first game against the Rams when he came back and he was in relief for Russell Wilson. I think the Rams were up like 14-6. And Geno Smith led the Seahawks on a drive all the way down the field, touchdown to Metcalf on the left sideline. I think it was over Darion Kendrick. It may not have been, but like Geno has been pretty decent. He had a really great first year, as you mentioned, but like new offensive coordinator in Ryan Grubb from Washington. Not a huge fan of offensive coordinators coming from college. I was obviously sad.
Shout out to Liam Cohen, who's now in Tampa.
Yep. Good point. I'm obviously not upset over the fact that they released Jamal Adams. Right. I mean, like that was just Cooper Kupp absolutely cooked him when he was healthy. So maybe we were a little bit upset because it was so much fun to watch that happen consistently. Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams, Will Dissly, all veterans that were released. So like you mentioned, they're going to be rebuilding over the next couple of years. But I still think they're kind of coming around that 7-8 win total. I think maybe 8-9 wins would be their sweet spot, and I think that would be considered overachieving. But Byron Murphy being their top pick, thinks he's going to be the next Aaron Donald. We don't think he's going to be. Seahawks fans think they got the next Aaron Donald. AJ Barner from Michigan, I really like. DJ James from Auburn. But otherwise, I think lackluster. And when you bring a new coach into a facility and you're trying to build from the ground up, or at least from a 7-8 win perspective, which is kind of similar what Sean McVay took over in the Jeff Fisher era, right? Besides the fact that the last year, where they were like 4-12 or whatever it was, and Goff's first year, you still have some decent core players. You still have some things to build on. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they kind of reshape it in future years. But like they're not a contender by any means. No. They're going to be scrappy. They're going to be a tough out probably later on in the season once they get together and the head coach gets in a little bit of a groove. But just, you can't be worried about the Seahawks.
No, I don't think they should be worried. I think that like the Rams or 49ers probably shouldn't be thinking about them. But that is also when they're primed to have like a sleeper steal game where they can kind of come in. But still, I just look at what happened in Denver. You bring in a coach who is already proclaimed to be the Super Bowl winning guy, and it's taking him 2 years to push out the quarterback that the previous regime signed, and then finally draft his guy, the 6th overall quarterback to go, and Bo Nix. And it's like, now they can finally start. Like, that's what I kind of foresee in Seattle, where it's going to take time for them to kind of climb the mountain just to get kind of back to relevancy, because it would be shocking to me to see them led by Geno with a whole new offensive coordinator. And they're over there, they're tearing down the pictures of the teams that won the Super Bowl and the Boom Squad because they really want to rebuild from the ground up. So, I actually think, just to go right into our next team, I think the Cardinals are further along in their path of coming back to climbing that mountain because they had that year last year.
You're right.
With their new coach, and then now they can start, coming back to being a potential team that
just real quick on the Seahawks before we jump over to Arizona. I thought Anthony Richardson was a good contender to become one of the franchise quarterbacks for the Seahawks. I thought even Michael Penix was a good option before Atlanta stole him. But I mean, you still got Geno Smith, and they also signed what's his name? Trying to remember. Quarterback for the Commanders, Sam Howell.
So,
right. I mean, a little bit of a contender. He's no Drew Lock, but I mean, he can air it out a little bit and played well.
I kind of love Sam Howell, to be honest with you. I forgot that they picked him up. I think that's actually fantastic. I'm going to give them a little more extra points.
Yeah, just take it as a note, right? Because you could see him at some point in the season if Geno doesn't last. But the Cardinals are also really interesting, and they're kind of in the same ballpark as the Seahawks. Over/under win total 7.5. The under is -152. So Vegas thinks that they're going to go under 7.5. But
by the way, that was set at 5.5 to start. I think people hammered over 5.5 because they just thought, okay, this is the team that's in the right direction. Kyler's coming back. Their head coach seems to know what he's doing. They won some games last year they weren't supposed to win. They had Dobbs as their quarterback at one point, and he was winning games. Right? Am I crazy?
No,
that's true. The Cowboys?
I think he did. It was one of their 4 wins, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, they almost got over 5.5 last year. They were kind of close. I think they almost beat the Bears. I don't even remember that. It was like a Christmas Day game I was watching. It was at your gender reveal party, and I had the over/under, and they kicked the field goal at the very end, and I was like, "Ah, shit." But whatever, doesn't matter.
That's hysterical. Yeah, I mean, they're so. I think they're going to be really interesting right now because Jonathan Gannon's in year 2. They finished the 2023 season 4-13 under him, but there was so much room to improve. I thought they were really scrappy towards the end of the year. I think they're going to benefit from Kyler Murray to have him just to start the 2024 season. He missed the first 9 games, so you saw a lot of Josh Dobbs, who's actually now in San Francisco. He replaced Sam Darnold while Kyler was recovering from a torn ACL. And the surgery was required at the end of the 2022 season. So they started really, really slow, especially with the new head coach. They scored 23 points total against our defense last year. 1 game with Kyler, they had 14 points. 1 game without him, they scored 9 points. But some other additions, Sean Murphy, Bunting, DJ Dallas, Justin Jones, an interior defense tackle that I like. They lost Hollywood Brown. He went to the Chiefs. But I thought that their draft was solid. Obviously, most notable is Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the face of the organization. But I think they had 11 total picks. They also took Darius Robinson, Trey Benson, Christian Jones from Texas, who I really like. So I think they're definitely going to be better than last year. But you just look at their historicals since 17 versus the division, 14-29 since 2021. They're 0-1 in the playoffs. Their only playoff chance came in that wild card round against Matthew Stafford. I think they lost that game, 34-11?
The best thing about that game was the Rams win. The second best thing about that game was the Eli Manning, The Rock, and Peyton Manning, where The Rock is like, all right, you're up again. Your back's against the wall. It's time for you to make a stand. And then Kyler throws a pick 6, and Eli's like, ah!
Yeah, The Rock was all disgruntled. He had the Chargers.
Yeah,
the Cardinals somehow in a bet.
He takes a shot of Terramana on camera because he's so mad at taking the Cardinals. But yeah, I mean that kind of has some. They were supposed to be the 1 seed that year. They had a collapse similar to the Eagles last year. They were on top of it, and thank God that we ended up winning that division, which gave us the home NFC Championship game. But yeah, that Cliff Kingsbury team was really riding high with Kyler for so long, and then it kind of all came crashing down to the point where they were like, how are we going to get rid of Kyler? Is Gannon going to keep him around? And now we're kind of back to I would say square 2 now with Kyler coming back and having a full season with the Cardinals again. So we'll see. It is funny that really has been their legacy though. It was the Kurt Warner almost Super Bowl win, and then the Kyler just getting destroyed by Aaron Donald every chance he gets.
Just Kyler being chased, which is just it's such a shame for Cardinals fans. But obviously he's a great quarterback. Was in the MVP conversation that 2021 year. Cardinals were somewhat of a powerhouse. Cliff Kingsbury was great at scheming up offenses, but had other lackluster areas in terms of his coaching expertise. Now you bring Jonathan Gannon in, and you feel like they're going to be better, probably on the same level as the Seattle Seahawks. So both of those teams, even if they're at 7-8 wins, they're going to be tough outs, right? I mean, they're going to have to find ways to win games. And I think that, if the Rams don't come prepared 1 week, they could steal games, despite the fact that the Rams have had ownership in terms of regular season records and the playoffs over both squads. So
Am I crazy to think the last time the Cardinals beat the Rams was October 2021? Or we had to have split with them
No,
at some point, right?
I think that's right.
Really?
But I also don't know because I remember Sean McVay saying Cliff Kingsbury ain't got any shit on us. So I don't know if the Cardinals. I feel like maybe there was one game, or maybe it was in the pandemic year where they played like on a Tuesday night. I'm not sure, but
Well, I mean, that would have been before, but yeah,
right,
still.
right. Yeah, no, I was just looking too, like in terms of divisions, like what is this NFC West going to be most comparable to? I was looking at the NFC North, right? Because you look at the Lions and the Packers, both probably going to be hovering
So
around
who are
11,
we?
12 wins.
We're Green Bay in the NFC North then?
Probably.
And then
in terms of
then
that
the
comparison.
Cardinals are the
The
Bears.
Vikings. Cardinals are the Vikings, or they're the Bears. Yeah.
I would say just based on quarterback comparisons, I'd put them as the Bears.
Yeah, but I mean, like the Vikings are going to be the biggest question mark in that division, but the Bears are on the rise too. I think they both could be 7, 8, 9 win teams, and I think the NFC East is going to be really lopsided with the Eagles and the Cowboys, and then you got the Commanders and the Giants towards the bottom of the division.
I'll do you one better. I think
Yeah.
the NFC East will be entirely lopsided in the fact that the Cowboys will be just sky high on top, and then everybody else will kind of be lower. I think the Eagles are going to take a big hit.
Yeah, the Nick Sirianni discussion is never ending, and then also like the South is really interesting because you got the Bucks and the Falcons probably
No,
both
it's not.
like.
Don't even kid yourself. The South
No,
is never interesting.
No, I know, but like the finish in terms of like, could a 9-win team make the playoffs? You
Could
know,
a 7-win team make the playoffs? Yeah, that's interesting, sure. But like, it's like, yeah, the Saints will be like 8-1 and like potentially be a playoff team that loses in the first round. But I don't think it'll be anything more than that.
Right. Hey, I agree. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So, you know, I think this season it's all based on how capable the Rams are coming into Week 1, how they've kind of continued to develop their run game, keeping Matthew Stafford healthy.
I think
What's
we
that?
should do a brother bet where we each put like 50 or $100 on Rams to win an NFC West, because I think that's
Deal.
fair.
Let's do it.
Yeah, when I'm
Let's
home
do it.
and I can legally gamble, I'll place it on DraftKings for us.
Sounds
Because
good.
that'll probably be like nice plus money.
Yeah, it will be. It definitely will be. You might get it like plus 250 or plus 300 somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
So I think it was plus 350 last time I saw it. But if you guys are enjoying the podcast, make sure that you like and subscribe. Appreciate that you guys made it this far. We love you guys. Rams talk for the foreseeable future. And we will talk to you guys soon as we get into training camp in the preseason. It's all coming around the corner really quickly.
Yeah, training camp is going to be here before you know it. What was it, like 4 days or something like that?
Yeah, it's the 23rd. It starts.
Wowee. Yeah, so exactly 4. Good on me for knowing.
Yeah, spot on. Well done. We appreciate you guys. Nick, always fun. And we will talk to you guys really soon.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. Like and subscribe. Go Rams.
Peace. Go Rams.